They say every shadow hides something. Most are harmless, but not all. Some lean closer when you're not looking, waiting for the perfect moment to be noticed. Tonight, one of those shadows has stepped forward, and once you see it, you'll never forget it. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. This is Silent Scream, where every story drags you a little deeper into the shadows. Stay if you're curious, but don't say I didn't warn you. Let's not waste another moment. The night is waiting, and so is the tale you came for.
The rain hadn't let up for hours, washing the streets into reflective rivers of yellow light. And that's when he appeared. A man in a yellow raincoat, standing under the flickering street lamp like he belonged to the shadows themselves. The locals knew better than to approach. They whispered of curses, of tragedies that followed him like a storm cloud. Anyone who saw him would lose someone they loved within 3 days. Elliot Kane, investigative journalist with a reputation for debunking myths, laughed at the superstition. Yellow raincoat, ominous predictions? Sure, it made for a good clickbait headline, but he didn't believe in ghosts. That is, until he saw him. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, but Elliot could feel the weight of inevitability pressing down. He raised his camera ready to capture the hoax and froze. The man's hood slipped back just enough to reveal eyes that didn't look human, eyes that seemed to know every secret Elliot had buried. Elliot knew he should run. He didn't, because in that moment he understood the terrifying truth. Some legends aren't meant to be debunked. They are meant to be survived.
Rain pounded relentlessly over Millfield, a small town that seemed to exist in its own muted world, forgotten by time and light. Elliot Kane had arrived late in the evening, suitcase in one hand, notebook in the other, determined to uncover the truth behind the town's most infamous legend, the man in the yellow raincoat, a figure whispered about for decades, appearing without sound or warning before tragedies struck. Elliot had built his career on debunking myths like this. Ghosts, curses, urban legends, they were nothing more than collective hysteria, he believed. He had reasons to believe. Years ago, Elliot had lost his younger sister in a car accident that remained unexplained. Ever since, he had devoted himself to proving the world was rational, predictable, and knowable. No supernatural force could touch him. But the town, he quickly realized, was different. The streets were slick with rain, neon signs reflecting off puddles like fragmented mirrors. Shops were shuttered early, and the locals hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas clutched tight, eyes cast down. He ducked under a corner shop awning, jotting down notes and observing. Everyone avoided the main street after sundown. The wind whispered through the alleys, carrying fragments of hurried conversations. If you see him, someone dies. Elliot scoffed. Good material for a feature, he thought. Maybe a viral story. Hours passed. The rain softened into drizzle. Street lamps flickered against the fog, curling along the asphalt. That's when he saw him. A figure standing beneath the pale light of a single lamp. Yellow raincoat, hood drawn over the head, hands shoved into pockets. Silent, immobile, impossibly still. Elliot froze. The camera felt heavy in his grip. Rationality screamed it was a trick of the light, a shadow distorted by rain and fog, yet a cold, inexplicable dread settled in his chest. He raised the camera, clicked the shutter. Nothing. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, or at least it seemed that way. Elliot's heart pounded, a strange rhythm that didn't match his own. He stepped closer, the mist curling around his legs like icy fingers. Each step felt heavier than the last. "Excuse me," he called, voice hollow against the quiet street. The figure tilted its head slightly, revealing a flash of face beneath the hood. Eyes. Not human eyes, Elliot realized. They carried weight, the inevitability of fate itself. Instinct screamed at him to run. Rationality demanded proof. Elliot did neither, rooted to the spot. And then, in an instant, the figure vanished. The next day, Elliot began interviewing locals. Stories were chillingly consistent. A neighbor had glimpsed the figure 3 nights before her husband died of a sudden illness. A father had seen him at the park. That same week, his daughter vanished. Each sighting followed by tragedy, always within 3 days. Elliot dismissed it at first, coincidence, pattern recognition, hysteria. But the accounts piled up, each more disturbing than the last. In the police archives, he found reports of sudden deaths, accidents, and disappearances. Some mentioned a figure in yellow, though no official investigation ever confirmed it. Diaries from townsfolk told similar tales, sightings that coincided with personal loss, sometimes accompanied by fleeting anomalies. A puddle reflecting something that wasn't there, shadows stretching unnaturally, the faint smell of rain even indoors. That night, Elliot stayed at the Millfield Inn. Rain lashed against the windows, shadows shifted. A creak in the hallway made him tense, and then out the window, illuminated by a flickering street lamp, he saw him again. Closer this time, eyes locked onto Elliot's. The street between them was empty, yet the figure seemed to exist inside Elliot's mind, pressing down, suffocating, bending reality. The camera on the desk trembled. Elliot ran outside. The street was empty. Only the wind, only the rain. Sleep became impossible. He began seeing flashes in reflective surfaces, yellow jackets in store windows, puddles, mirrors, always at the edge of perception. Hallucinations, he told himself. At each sighting brought subtle anomalies. Objects slightly moved, lights flickering, clocks stopping. Reality seemed to bend around the memory of the figure. 3 days later, tragedy struck. Not someone else, his editor, who had mocked his obsession, died in a bizarre industrial accident. Elliot felt hollow. He hadn't believed until the curse touched someone he cared about. Determined to understand, Elliot delved deeper. The town's archives revealed the first recorded sighting almost a century ago, each appearance preceding misfortune, each vanishing without a trace. Attempts to confront or chase him had ended in madness or death. He started to notice patterns. Sightings were often near water, reflections, or during storms. Sometimes the figure appeared in photographs long after they were taken. Elliot obsessed over every image, analyzing pixels, shadows, and angles. The more attention he paid, the more persistent the sightings became. The encounters escalated. In a foggy alleyway, he glimpsed the figure at the far end. Elliot ran, only to find the alley stretched impossibly long, shadows twisting into grotesque forms. At Cathay, the yellow jacket appeared in the reflection of the window when the street was empty. His own reflection seemed distorted, his eyes hollowed out and fearful. Sleep deprivation and obsession took their toll. He heard whispers, soft and distant at first, then louder, taunting, almost illegible. He dreamed of tragedies before they happened. His sister's death replayed, friends disappearing, strangers collapsing in the streets. Waking hours brought a creeping paranoia. Every stranger a potential omen, every shadow a threat. Elliot debated moral choices. Should he warn people, or would interference accelerate tragedies?
When he tried to warn a family whose child had seen the figure, an accident still occurred. His warnings seemed useless, possibly even complicit. Guilt gnawed at his remnants of skepticism. One night, during a storm that mirrored the first evening he arrived, Elliot saw him inside his apartment. Rain dripped from the coat, eyes hollow, unblinking, impossible. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, bending with the figure's presence. Elliot backed into the wall, gripping his camera like a talisman. The figure didn't move or speak, yet Elliot felt every hidden fear, every secret, every memory of loss pressed against his mind. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then, as silently as it appeared, the figure left. The rain stopped. Elliot was alone. Weeks passed. The figure followed him in subtle ways, reflections, peripheral glimpses, fleeting shadows in the corner of his eye. Elliot's obsession consumed him. He tracked patterns, where it appeared, when and how people died after sightings. Some deaths seemed avoidable, some inevitable. Tragedies layered on one another. Locals who dismissed him died. Minor incidents escalated to horrific accidents. Elliot began chronicling them obsessively, trying to find logic, patterns, a loophole. Nothing worked. The climax came in a hotel lobby far from Millfield. Elliot cut a flash of yellow in the mirrored wall. The figure stood perfectly still, hood over his head, hands in pockets, eyes fixed on him. Elliot's camera trembled in his hands. He realized in that instant that this was no legend to expose, no myth to debunk. The man in the yellow raincoat had chosen him. Every photo, every attempted perf, every investigation had fed the figure's purpose. Elliot understood his role. Not an observer, not a skeptic, but a participant. A witness trapped in a cycle of inevitability. Powerless to intervene, powerless to escape.
Elliot Kane never escaped Millfield, or the figure that had haunted him since the first stormy night. Even hundreds of miles away, in the dim light of hotel lobbies and the quiet corners of distant cafes, he felt the weight of those yellow eyes on him. Shadows bent unnaturally at the edge of his vision. Reflections lingered longer than they should, and every photograph he took seemed to post with a quiet malevolence, as if the figure existed not just in the world, but in the very act of observing him. Friends and colleagues noticed the change. His once sharp humor had dulled into sarcasm, tinged with paranoia. He flinched at sudden movements, glanced repeatedly over his shoulder, and his hands shook whenever a reflective surface caught his attention. He tried to explain it to himself rationally, tried to convince himself it was stress, sleep deprivation, obsession, but deep down he knew better. One evening he sat alone in his apartment reviewing photos from the past week. In nearly every frame he could see traces of yellow, a coat reflected in a darkened window, a blurred figure in the distance, a puddle warped into a face that wasn't there. His heart pounded as the realization sank in. He had become part of the cycle. The observer could no longer separate himself from the observed. Every attempt to capture the truth only tethered him closer to the figure's inevitable influence. Outside, the rain fell in rhythmic pulses, echoing the heartbeat that had grown too loud in his chest. Then, a flash in the window, just a glimpse of yellow. He froze, camera trembling in hand, breath caught in his throat. The figure stood in the street below, hood drawn, hands in pocket, unmoving, waiting, watching. As Elliot looked, the air seemed to thicken, pressing down like wet sand. He wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but every instinct told him that running would do nothing. The realization hit him with icy clarity. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. The man in the yellow raincoat didn't merely herald death, he orchestrated inevitability. And Elliot's obsession, his documentation, his very attention had made him a part of the design. He had crossed the line from skeptic to participant. He raised the camera slowly, capturing the figure in the dim glow of the street lamp. The shutter clicked. A soft ripple, like a shiver in the fabric of reality, ran through the street. Elliot's own reflection caught in the glass, eyes hollow, shadows curling unnaturally, fingers trembling over the camera. Somewhere in that silent instant, he understood what he had long feared. No warning could save him. No evidence could protect him. No flight could break the cycle. The figure tilted its head slightly, just enough for Elliot to glimpse the impossible depth of those eyes. Eyes that seemed to know every secret, every fear, every loss he had ever endured. Then it stepped back into the mist, disappearing from sight, leaving only the echo of inevitability in the air. Elliot lowered the camera, heart hammering, mind racing. He knew, somewhere deep in the fog of his obsession, that someone's life had just begun its countdown, and somewhere, perhaps in another rainy street, another unsuspecting witness would see him or the figure again. He sank into the chair, unable to move, unable to think. The world outside was silent, but the storm had not ended. Somewhere, just beyond the edge of perception, the man in the yellow raincoat waited. And Elliot, once skeptic, now a haunted witness, could only sit and watch. The countdown began. Rain pattered against the window. Shadows stretched. And somewhere, the inevitable whispered.
Maybe it's over. Or maybe the ending is still out there, waiting for the next person who dares to notice. If this story left you unsettled, good. That means you're listening. Subscribe for more nights like this, where the shadows have voices and the walls remember. Until next time, keep your lights low and your fears closer.